podcast, episode 25. In studio, just me today. Everybody else jumped out. I'll beat them up later. No biggie. Family always comes first, right? But also on Skype, I have a legitimate madman for y'all. Brandon Mikesell, man who decided he wanted to strap a suit on himself and jump out of high places and plains and mountains. Brandon, you just woke up one day and strapped a suit on yourself and started jumping off things, or how does that happen?
So it's actually a lot longer of a process than what most people think. A lot of people think literally that. Like, I have people come up to me all the time, and first thing they say is, "Where can I buy the suit? I want to do it." And I'm like, "Oh, no. Like, this has taken me, 8 years of this is what I do almost every single day. I kind of woke up one day. I had some bad history in the past. I kind of got into some trouble when I was younger. And so one day I just hit rock bottom. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I don't know where or what. All I want to know is that I just know that since I was 2 years old, I've just wanted to fly. That's just been my biggest thing. And one day I was on YouTube and just randomly stumbled across this video. And I was like, oh, my God, what is that? I want to do that. And then literally from that day forward, I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to set out and I'm going to fly as much as I possibly can. And then just went down this long, long process. So, I mean, as far as the process goes, which is like the number one question that I probably get the most, is you start out skydiving. So you start out jumping out of a plane, just regular, plain clothes, jumping out, free falling, everyone's having a good time. And then from there, you just slowly progress. So then you put on, a wingsuit after 200 jumps. So there's actually a lot of laws and restrictions. It's not like you just go skydive a couple times and you throw on a wingsuit. You have to have a minimum of 200 regular skydives. You have to go through this long process. You have to take tests. You have to do these certain things. So it's actually a pretty long process.
200 jumps. I mean, wow. I know in the Army you only have to jump like 5 times to get airborne certified. So wow. 200, and this is civilian, all on your own dime, right? I mean, you have to kind of set out on this path. And you talked a little bit about, you just mentioned that you had gotten in trouble, you'd hit rock bottom. I don't mean to sound funny, but I kind of expect a man who straps a suit and goes flying to be a little bit of a troublemaker in his youth. I expect a little bit of, it's kind of like. We have a MMA fighter on this podcast, one of the other co-hosts, and we all three train jiu-jitsu. And one of the things that we're all a little crazy, right? People that are in this arena of what you would almost offhandedly call thrill-seeking, or physical arts of things like that. They're all a little, a touch different than people of normal society. But then again, isn't all great people a little off in the head when it comes to what they want to do or how far they want to achieve things?
Right. Like, I feel like there's, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I think there's a certain aspect with a lot of people that are out there doing a lot of these, I wouldn't say necessarily crazy things, but more pushing the envelope of certain things. And I think we all have that certain aspect, right? Like, we have this obsession, we have this drive that just eats us alive, and we need to do these things, or else we don't feel complete or we don't feel whole, So I think you nailed it. That's exactly it. But I also get a lot of times, because of what I do, that people literally think I'm crazy. Like, legitimately, you are crazy. You don't have a single sane bone in you, And that's really not who I am at all. Like, if anybody who's ever spent more than 10 minutes with me knows that I'm completely terrified of everything. Like, I'm completely terrified of heights. I hate heights with a passion.
Oh.
I hate spiders. I hate snakes. I'm scared like everybody else, the main thing I try and tell people too is, if we're standing on the edge of a cliff, if it was me and you standing on the edge, I guarantee you that I'm more scared than you. And that tends to blow people away.
So is some of this a way of gaining control of that fear? Is some of this a way of how you not necessarily conquer it? Because the one thing about fear I think people need to understand, in jiu-jitsu, and just to bring it back to that for a second, it's a physical grappling. It's this uncomfortable, especially if someone ever gets on top of you and they're trying to choke you out or anything like that. It's this just insane amount of discomfort. But if you're there enough, if you're there long enough, if you're put there as many times as needed to learn that it's okay to be with that feeling. It's okay to become comfortable with the uncomfortable, if that's a good way to phrase it, maybe. Is that part of that? I think
you nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I literally think you nailed that. Like I was the person that was scared of everything. Like I was literally scared of death. I was scared of, heights. I was scared of spiders, snakes, everything. But then what happens is like you start to slowly control one. And not really control it, but you just start to, exactly what you said, you start to feel more comfortable with it. And then all of a sudden, like now I couldn't have been in a room with a spider. Like I just freak out, like I don't know why, right. But it just scared the living F out of me, But now it's at the point now where like I see a spider and I'll reach out to it and I'll try and let it crawl on me because you realize exactly what you said. When you start to make yourself feel uncomfortable, then you can start to push your own envelope, whatever that might be, whether it's a everyday thing, something like jumping off of a cliff obviously isn't normal for most people. So when they try and say, well, I mean, I'm not like you, I'm not going to jump off a cliff. Yeah, but you can take the same aspect of that and you can take the same, I'm going to control this small point in my life that I'm fearful of something and that I can see it kind of takes a hold of me here and there. And I can just get comfortable with it. And over time, you'll start to see yourself get more comfortable with it. And that can be like spread out to everyday life. Like you said, whether it's martial arts, whether it's scared, do you want to leave this job to go to another job type thing? Like there's a lot of aspects in my life that have just grown tenfold. And it's all because I've gotten myself comfortable to being uncomfortable,
So I guess and Dylan's gonna make fun of me, ladies and gentlemen, for this one when he hears this. But I think then it's almost impossible to distinguish what we call courage and what we call discipline. Because they both have the same first step of you just gotta do it. You gotta have a little bit of self-realization, right, of what it is you want to achieve in life, what it is you want to conquer in life or achieve, and then you just kind of gotta get after it, right? Did you know that it was going to take 200 jumps to start in this wingsuit, or was that something, or was that, oh, that's what I got to achieve? Okay, let's go do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, when I hit rock bottom, and like I don't want to say that everybody has to go to rock bottom, because I don't believe you really have to go to rock bottom in order to like find yourself and figure out what you want to do. But for me, that's where I went. I went to rock bottom, and then from there I was like, okay, I want to do this. I can't do anything else. This is what I want to do. And then from there, yeah, the 200 jumps, the 1,000 jumps. I mean, if it was 5,000 jumps I needed, it was going to happen. You know what I mean? It was just one of those things where, like, when I get obsessed with something, I'm going to do it. Like, right. I don't know what it is about it, but when I'm set on something, I just go and do it. So, yeah, so whether it was 200, 500, or 5,000, I was still going to make it happen. Once I decided in my brain, this is what I'm going to do.
And so 200 jumps, right? I would almost assume that after a while, certain things would become mechanical with just jumping out of an airplane and just regular skydiving. It almost maybe, I would imagine that you had to establish some sort of routine. Okay, I'm going to do so many jumps this month. I'm going to have this much money to do these jumps. You had to have a plan, right? There had to be some sort of continual thought process. And how did you push yourself through some things, even in something as exciting as skydiving? I'm sure that there was mundane parts that you had to push yourself through to get there. Did you have anything that kind of helped you get through the mundane, shall we say?
Yeah, for sure. Like especially in the beginning, because I don't come from money. Like my family isn't made of money, so a lot of this stuff, or 99.9% of everything that I did, I paid for myself, and I've had to work for it. So with that being said, that was probably the hardest part. This is one of the most expensive sports out there, so it's very very expensive. Like for just kind of a ratio of the amount of money I've spent, I could have definitely bought me a house by now. You know, like it's definitely full dedication, full throttle forward. As far as like the mundane stuff, it's definitely an aspect of not getting too comfortable, right? Is it's like all this stuff is kind of mundane sometimes, especially when it comes to skydiving. Because yeah, I jump off of mountains and I fly through trees and through rivers and things like that, right? That skydiving kind of becomes mundane, but at the same time, that mundane nearly almost killed me about a year ago. Because of, again, you get too comfortable with certain things, and that aspect really plays. Like there is no room for error in this sport. Like that little error that you might get, that might be your last error. So it's important to always stay on top of yourself and not make it feel mundane. And that was another like kick in the butt. It was that, hey, you better get back to it. You better realize that the sport will and can kill you. And you always know that because of people around you as well too. You know, you have close friends that pass away, and so you realize it. But sometimes, you know, a small little kick in the butt can all of a sudden make that mundane not mundane anymore, and then you realize it. So for me, it was skydiving. So I was skydiving. It was about a year ago. I was traveling down south where it's nice and hot because I live up in Seattle, Washington. So right now it's rainy, dark, and gloomy out. But so we traveled down there, went skydiving, and next thing you know, like we're planning out a huge jump with like 5 or 6 people. Yep, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. Okay. Follow us, because we had been teaching these people a few things. Like, hey, we're going to show you guys. Cool. Yep. Back and forth, just having a good time. And then on the last jump of the day, we were just like, okay, follow us. And so me and my buddy, we get out. We're doing a bunch of stuff, having a good old time. And next thing you know, some guy just blast through the formation because he had no idea like what was going on. He wasn't paying attention. We weren't paying attention. We were so focused on having a good time. Everyone's, you know, having fun. And he just shattered my ankle, like just 90 degrees off, 120 miles per hour. Closing speed was probably close to 300. You know, we're just hauling. So he just shattered my ankle. I'm tumbling out of the sky trying to figure out, you know, why my leg isn't working, because I'm trying to counteract. And so it's one of those things where it was even skydiving, and skydiving almost is what killed me. It wasn't the base jumping. It wasn't jumping off the mountains. It wasn't that. It was as what I would call, from my perspective, a more mundane jump, right. You know? And so I think that's the perfect point. It was the mundane stuff that sometimes you start to sit back and you're like, it's not really mundane, because skydiving out of a plane, jumping out of a plane with a bunch of people is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than being in a mountain and flying by a tree, you know? I don't have to worry about the tree reaching out and grabbing me, you know?
Right.
So,
yeah. I guess the devil's in the details at times, right? It is.
For sure.
And I mean, the dire physical consequences of issues. And, you know, I guess I haven't thought about it before. You're always with somebody or a group of people and things like that. So the level of trust that has to occur, right? There has to be I don't know about you, but for me, it would have to be like, bro, I trust you with my life, literally, as we're going through this. Do you have Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I mean, on that aspect, that's 100% correct, right? Like my cameraman, my best friend, and the whole entire world, you know, there's a very, very clear trust that we have, you know. He is 90% of the time not looking at his surroundings, at his terrain. He's really not judging much. He's maybe taking a quick glance, and then he'll keep checking out on me because he has to just stare at me the whole time. You know, he can't lose focus. And there's a very distinct trust that we have. You know, I will never put him in a bad spot. And that is what is super important to me. You know, if I happen to go in, if I happen to die, that's my choice. It's a choice that I made. But when you have somebody else's life in your hands, literally, like you said, you know, there's a very distinct trust you have to have that it really does play a toll on me. Like that's probably the most scared that I am, is not actually for myself. It's literally that I have somebody behind me that is literally gauging off of everything. You know, I'm constantly reading terrain. I'm constantly reading glide ratio. Are we going to make it here? Are we going to make it there? You know, like when he's sleeping at night, I'm on Google Earth, you know, reading the terrain, studying the terrain, you know, like not that he's not, it's just that I'm the one that's leading everything. So there's a very clear, distinct trust. And it took us several years to get there. But at the same time, that's probably what weighs on me probably the most, because of I have somebody else's life in my hands. You know, like I can easily mess up and it's no longer my mistake. It's a mistake that I've made for him, his wife, his family. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's probably the number one thing that weighs on me the most is that trust that you have to have.
I guess this kind of leads me a little bit down a rabbit hole, but adrenal exhaustion. Do you ever find yourself just kind of like put to the bottom, you know, as far as like, because I know if I train just physical training and push myself into that adrenaline threshold, you know, push my cardio up to those high levels and get my heart rate to 160 beats per minute and hold it for a sustained amount of time, toward the end of the week, my adrenaline level and my, you know, I'm bottomed out on my energy level. So do you find yourself having to space out and manage your adrenal inputs in any way?
Yeah, but like, it's kind of hard because we definitely do have that. And we definitely do feel like if I'm jumping for, say, a week straight and it's the most intense stuff, you know, like I definitely feel that by the end of the week. I'm definitely the exact same as you. I'm like, man, whew, you know, I just don't even know if I have that excitement in me anymore. Right. Yeah, and it's not that I'm looking for that excitement, right? It's just that it's there, and that's what kind of helps you. You know, it like slows everything down. It helps you focus a little bit more. And so I definitely feel that sometimes. But at the same time, I think because I've been doing it for so long now, the 8 years, and because of when we go and we charge hard and like we're going to go do a project or a commercial, or we're just out there filming something, we do it for usually a long expended time. So usually with that, then you kind of get used to it, and then you try not to expend all that on the first day. Even though that's the most exciting part, because maybe you're doing something new, like now you try and trick yourself a little bit more, which I'm sure you're aware of too, right? Like if you know you're going to be doing it for a week, you try and save yourself a little bit. You try and like not get too excited, not get too hyped up. But yes, we definitely have the exact same thing that you have as well.
Yeah. So I guess this kind of leads, is there any sort of strength training that you do, or physical exercise? I mean, I just imagine the kind of mental toll on the body that making decisions constantly at, you know, triple-digit miles per hour, constantly over and over and over. Is there any physical stuff, though, that you need? I mean, I'm just imagining there's kind of wear and tear on the shoulders and things like that, kind of holding yourself in some of these open-out positions. It seems like you're kind of opened out all the time, so I was just thinking about, like, the upper body physical requirements or...
So honestly, I weigh like $125. I'm just skin and bones, pretty much, you know. But a lot of people do think that we're holding ourselves there, and that's really not the case. The suits nowadays really start to inflate themselves, and once they do, they kind of hold their own position. So they help guide you a little bit. Now, of course, you can move and do whatever you want with the suit, but there's kind of like this zero balance that it has. You know, it wants to sit you on this arc, and you'll kind of just glide there, and then you kind of maneuver it. So as far as like the physical side of it, it's really not that bad at all. Now, if you're doing longer flights, yes, you definitely feel it in your arms, your shoulders, and things like that. I'm just too lazy to go out there and work out, so to be honest, I don't. but I say the main thing though is probably the hiking, because you know we'll go on 4, 6 hour, 8 hour hikes, and there'll be, you know, like an elevation gain of 7,000-8,000 feet sometimes. Right. So like, I mean, you'll be sitting at an exit point at 12,000, 11,000 feet, you know, and then you got to now hike all the way up there, jump, and still have all this energy to do everything, So that's probably the main thing that a lot of people try and focus on the most is the hiking aspect of it.
Well, yeah, and you know what? The moment you said it, it was a duh moment for me. Like, oh yeah, duh, of course. And you have to, and like, how much weight would you say that you carry? I'm assuming a lot of it's in a backpack and things like that. How much would you say your backpack weighs, and your cameraman's? I mean, like, how much do you typically have to carry up a hike like that?
So what sucks is for somebody like me who weighs, 125, 130 pounds, who's only like 5'6", our packs don't really vary that much, like they might vary by a couple pounds, but usually you're carrying anywhere between 20 pounds, maybe 22 pounds up a hill. It can go up more for my cameraman as well too.
Right.
But thankfully he's like a bigger guy, so it's not too big of an issue. But his can weigh anywhere up to like 30 pounds sometimes, depending on what we're doing, So it's definitely quite a bit of weight when you're talking, miles and miles and miles that you're walking as you're hiking. But that's probably the biggest thing is just staying active, keeping your legs going, because the last thing you want to do is be exhausted. Like you were saying, at the end of the week, if you're exhausted, well, that's our kind of end of the week. If you're up 11,000 feet high and you're too exhausted to jump, you're sure in heck not going to hike down. Yeah. So now you got to make a rash decision of, okay, I can't hike down because I'm too tired, but I'm really tired to fly. Whereas that's where you got to be in your A game. You got to have full energy. So it's like a back and forth sometimes. You really got to make sure you're in shape and ready to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, like I was just thinking, like, I've hiked up mountains and done trail running and things like that, and I've gotten to the top of the mountain with that spectacular view. But if you looked at me and then was like, "All right, now jump," I'd be like, "Hey, bruh, we're gonna have to wait a few." I'm trying to walk myself through the process of how I would even talk myself into that right now. Of okay, now we do what we're here for. No, I just spent several hours walking. That's what I was here for. I'm going back down. Yeah. So length of flight. What is the short end of a flight, and then what is like you don't fly any longer than this, and what determines those kind of things?
Right. So the main thing is, so if you jump out of an airplane in a wingsuit, that's roughly depending on your suit size, because there's suit size variations too. So that'll give you more glide or more lift. But just on average, you're probably looking out of an airplane, probably looking at about 3 minutes. Longest being 4 minutes, and that's like just max glide. And then usually for mountains, it's a lot shorter. Usually for a mountain jump, you're probably looking anywhere between 30 seconds to a minute and a half. A minute and a half is kind of like the high range of that. You might get like a mountain jump of 2 minutes or something, but that's roughly about it. So a lot of people tend to think it's a lot longer, and that's because a lot of us, we chop and edit our videos, right? Like we can't just play it all the way through, but a lot of people think that, maybe half our video is one flight or something like that. Okay. So then they think that we're up there for, 4 or 5 minutes, and like, no, my arms would fall off, I think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like I was thinking earlier, just the holding of some of them positions, there's almost a mental game, right? I know whenever I'm working out, I do a lot of real slow, like there's a lot of times whenever I'm working out, I do a lot of like 5-rep kind of things, heavy 5-rep, real slow, pushing myself through a motion, hold, and now that I'm thinking about it, I zone out a lot in that. I'm just kind of trying to stay, and everything else kind of fades out, but I'm able to have that luxury because, well, I'm not worried about, some other object coming out in front of me and hitting me. Like, how do you mitigate the burning sensations and pushing that all out of your mind and focusing on the couple of minutes of flying that has to happen right now? I got to stay in the now. I got to stay in the now. Is there any sort of mental process that goes through your head, or?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to say one thing in particular, but really, like, say we get up to the top of the mountain, we usually take a 10, 15-minute break. We kind of all gather, talk about some things, laugh about some things, just try and forget the hike now and try and like move on to the next thing and just try and relax and gain some of our energy back. And then from there, though, like from the actual jump point, is I'm most terrified during the countdown, of course, right? The 3, 2, 1, and then see ya. But as soon as I say see ya, it's like an automatic response. Like me physically, a lot of people don't do this, but I have to count down out loud, even if I'm by myself, or say I'm like the last person on the hill, and so I'm jumping last. I'm physically counting out loud because it's a switch in my brain, right? It's that switch of like, okay, on see ya, my brain knows what to do. It takes over. Like I'm not even there, if that makes sense. I'm just kind of just living in the moment, and I'm not really thinking about like my training, my body, all that stuff is just doing the work for me at that point. I'm not even there. I'm just kind of just going along for the ride, if that makes sense. Like, it's probably the closest thing to like a meditation I can get to. It's kind of like what you're saying with the reps, right? Like you're there, but you're just so focused on this one thing that you're not really worried about anything else. You're solely focused on this one thing. And that's literally the exact same thing that I go through and that most of us go through, is like, we're just so focused on this one thing that like my bills that I have to pay, my car, my house, like just all these other things that I might have to worry about, my job, everything else, it's just obsolete. It's the closest thing I can get to for meditation, even though I can't even meditate. Like I can't even come close to it. Like I cannot shut my brain off. It's just always going. So it's by far the closest thing I can get to that feeling, because I'm just living in the moment. There's nothing else I'm thinking about. I'm just so focused in on this and this one thing,
Yeah, so a lot of people think about meditation and meditative states only occurring at the end of the spectrum of I've taken away all the stimuli and I've slowed myself down to that point. But I haven't found that to be the case with everybody. MMA fighters, you're talking about it, and a lot of those the guys on the other end of the spectrum, it's once the input becomes so much. It's once the input is as max as the human experience right now allows us to be, that's whenever certain people hit that state. Boom. I'm here now. I'm in the moment. Championship round in jiu-jitsu or something at a tournament, or MMA fight, right when the cage locks and that the ref says go. A lot of those guys, and you're saying it too, they say that's whenever it hits me. Boom. And then I'm in that moment. And it kind of speaks to me that not all meditation is the same meditation. Maybe not all human experience is the same human experience. So I have to wonder, just ask this crazy question. Was there a moment in time where you walk in and go, Mom, Dad, I'm going to get in a wingsuit and I'm going to fly? Was there
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was that was definitely a fun time. So, like, the thing is like my parents are extremely, extremely hard workers. Like I'm sure a lot of parents are, right? Like I like to say, of course, everyone's going to say, oh, my parents are the best. They're the hardest workers, are the most loving, But like my dad was in the military. My dad was never really around growing up because he was always gone. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I knew what he was doing for our family, and I knew what my mom was doing. She was that mom that was working, 9 to 5 every day, then coming home and cooking, and then like making sure we got our homework done. She is the super mom because my dad wasn't around.
Hats off to mom.
So the fact that yeah, for sure. And so, with that being said, then you go from, okay, I went to college. I graduated from college. And then I come to my parents after hitting a rock bottom for myself and having that conversation of, hey, Mom and Dad, this is what I want to do. And the first thing out of their mouth, of course, is, you're crazy. We're not going to allow you just to go and kill yourself. It's like this, no, you can't, you just can't do that. That's not acceptable. Like, that's not what normal people do. And so it was actually a tough road for us for a certain point. There was probably a solid year where me and my parents really had a tough time trying to see eye to eye. Like, right. There was just a lot of things going on around that time, and we just could not see eye to eye. But through that, I'm not one of those people where I just want to go do this because I'm a thrill seeker. That was never my goal. That was never my passion. I just really wanted to do it because that's what I wanted to do, and that's what makes me feel whole flying, and that's just always been my passion. So through that, what I did is to try and help out with my parents is I try to do like I try to do as much research on it as possible. Yes, this is a very, very dangerous sport that needs to be taken very, very seriously, and this is not something that should be taken lightly. But with that, there's a lot of things you can gain from it, and my life in general it's just tenfold. Like, it's just so much better. And it's not because of the jumping. It's not because of the thrill seeking. It's because of what I get out of it and the appreciation for life, the joy that I get out of it from having me constantly chase my dreams and constantly having a goal and be like, here's what I want to do. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And no one's going to stop me from doing it. And to see that you can literally say something a year from now and be like, that's what I'm going to do. And then a year from then you do it and you look back and you're like, yeah, I don't see why this is so hard. Like, it takes a lot of dedication. It takes a lot of focus, but like something like that it's easy. Anybody can do. And like, that's the biggest thing I try and tell people is that is literally the easiest thing. It's just, you just got to focus on it and just don't let it out of your sight. And so once my parents started to see that and they started to see how focused I was and how much joy it brought me is when I could have real honest conversations with them about it. I could tell them, hey, like, look at this video. And it would be like somebody who might be doing something else. It's not actually wingsuiting, but it's talking about the joys that they get from it. And yes, this might be a little dangerous. Could you die? Yes. But like, here's what I get out of it. And here's why I do it, because I'm not very good with words sometimes. Like, I can't really describe exactly what's going on in my brain, like, I know what's going on up here, but like, I can't put it into words sometimes.
Yeah.
So I would just show them things. And then what's crazy is through that year, they were very, very anti-base jumping, very, very anti-skydiving, anti-wingsuiting. But what happened is, like, there was a switch. And I don't know exactly if it was something I said or something they noticed on their own, but there was a very distinct switch where instead of them wondering what I was doing and telling me, okay, well, you have a year, because it was right after college. So I moved back in with my parents, and then they're like, okay, you have a year, and we'll give you a year of some buffer time. And then after that, though, you're on your own. You got to figure this out for yourself. We're not going to support this. But after that year, though, it was just a switch. It flipped. And now they're literally the most supportive people I have in my life. Like, no matter what I want to do, no matter where I want to go or what I want to fly, or no matter how crazy it sounds to most people, they're like, yeah, do it. That's awesome. And it was only because I took the time to like make sure that they understood why I was doing this. Because honestly, not to go on too much of a rant, but like, if something did happen to me, they're obviously the ones that have to deal with it, right? Like, so I wanted to make sure that if something did happen to me for some odd reason, that they understood why, and that they weren't then like so many parents are who I might have known or who are friends of mine, where they have a very, very clear distaste for this sport, and I just didn't want that. I wanted my parents to understand and fully grasp why. And through that, the craziest thing is they've appreciated it themselves. I've seen a turn in them. They've grown so much within the past 7 years through looking at the aspect of life and what it means and why they're doing this and what's important to them. And not to toot my own horn, but my parents have told me, like, hey, we wouldn't be where we're at without you going through what you went through and try to explain this stuff to me. So like, my dad calls me young grasshopper. And so he does that because of like, I've shown another path to him, and you can kind of see his outlook and his change, and it's mind blowing. And that's probably the biggest joy that I've had with my parents, just through this whole process.
Yeah. What did you get your degree in?
I got it in sociology of criminal justice. So my original plan was to go to the Naval Academy, or to hopefully get into the officer program as well too after college. And my plan was to be a fighter pilot, and that's something that I always wanted to do. My brother went into flight school. My dad worked with the Blue Angels. My dad flew P3s. Like, I was just always around planes. I was always around jets, and it was something that like I was just obsessed with. Like, my dad would take me out of school, so he would, like I mentioned earlier, he was always gone, so he'd take me out. And so when he got back, we'd go, and I'd go to work with him. because I haven't seen my dad for 6-7 months, you know. So he'd be like, school's not that important. Let's go ahead and like we'll just take you out of school and you'll just come hang out with me for a couple days. And so we'd go, and like I was just around planes all the time. So like it was one of those things where I was just really, really obsessed with it. And I wanted to do flight school, but actually I have a major stuttering problem. So they have some type of test or something for the flight school where like where they try and catch the stutterers, and there's like sentences. Well, as you can tell, I can fake it pretty good. Like there are times that I slip up and like I just can't control it, but for the most part I can pretty much fake it. Well, through that I found out, because my brother was in flight school at the time and he was going through all this. He's like, look, Brandon, I know you can fake it. I know you can fake it better than anybody else, but eventually they're going to find out and you're going to get caught. Because he's like, I stutter just trying to talk to the air traffic control and everything else like that. He's like, and obviously I don't stutter. So I know it's going to affect you, and I know they're going to find out. And then now you're stuck in the military and you're stuck with a job that you probably don't want to do that wasn't your dream, you know?
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's, wow. So you just had this burning passion to fly, right? I mean, it was always in your head. It was always there. And I'm in the Army myself. And so I can only imagine, I mean, you are kind of put in a box at that point. If you do take the step in, well, now you're in, brother.
Right.
And so you've literally went your whole life, now you're into adulthood, and now you're just sitting at this point, right? I mean, you had to figure out something.
For sure. And that's pretty much what happened. Was like I was at this point where I'm like, okay, my brother told me I can't fake it. And now like my dreams are shattered. I think I was towards the end of my senior year of college, actually. So like I was almost about to graduate and then go off and then join the military and join the Navy and start down that road. So I was like, I don't know, maybe 6 months out at that time, you know, still chasing my dreams, still pursuing it. And then I just had this earth shattering just moment where I'm like, oh my God, what do I do with my life now? Like, this is all that I've known that I want to do. There's nothing else that I want to do. You know, like this is my number one passion. And through that is when I started to hit my rock bottom. You know, I started to, you know, I was drinking, partying all the time. And like, I was doing this beforehand, but like, it just went to a whole new level, right? Like, I was just like, well, you know, not realizing that at the time, I was like, I just don't know really what I'm doing with my life. One of these days I'll figure it out. I don't know. Who cares? You know, like that was my attitude. And so I graduated college. I got through that. And then through that, I was stuck there for a couple years of, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then like most people happens, if you're out there drinking all the time, like you get into a bar fight. And so I got into a bar fight, and next thing you know, I get arrested, and I'm sitting there like, what? How did I get from here, and this is what I was going to do, to now I'm here? You know, like it just doesn't make any sense. So I was trapped in this like moment of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then that's when I saw the video like I was talking about earlier. And that's what kind of changed my whole life was, oh, well, okay, maybe I can't be a pilot. Okay, maybe that's just not in my cards. But that doesn't mean I can't fly. That doesn't mean I can't find other aspects to still live out that dream. And then through there is when I found, obviously, wingsuiting, you know. So I was trapped in that box, like you said, for quite a while. And unfortunately for me, and I hope it doesn't happen to other people, but I had to hit rock bottom in order to be like, oh my God, okay, what am I doing with myself? And thankfully I found this as my outlet, you know.
And so, you know, you're saying that essentially you ran into some of life's mistakes just by having a few moments of your life, not even a long, expanded period of time of just not concentrating on what you were doing and where you were going. You literally just make it sound like just for a few months, you were kind of like, let's live life. You know, and I think so many people get stuck in just that hamster on the wheel cycle of, okay, I got this decent job, let me just work it for a few years, and then I'll look for something else, you know, and they won't even pursue a side job, or they won't even pursue a side passion. You know, and next thing you know, they're 40 pounds overweight sitting on the couch, you know, yelling at the TV because it's their favorite star didn't win the next reality show, And it's like,
Right.
what, and I think you're hitting a good point. Just a little bit of time of putting yourself in that situation can sometimes have consequences. But you were lucky enough to be ready to receive your passion, shall we say. You were still open
Right.
for it. You were still, okay, when it comes, I'm going to grab it. When it comes, I'm going to grab it.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is like me and my parents, we talk about probably the number one thing we talk about the most, and probably what I talk about with my friends the most, it is like I call it the zombie approach, right? Like the hamster on the wheel approach, right? Like you're just going through life. You're just going through the motions. And that's literally what I want to say 99% of us do is we're just going through the motions. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with just going through the motions in order to get to something else. But there has to be some type of carrot. Like a carrot is dangling.
Right, yeah.
Like there has to be something, like because there's certain times where I'm just like, okay, I have to do this because then that leads to that. So I'm just going through the mundane. But like at the same time, like there has to be this awareness of it. Like your job is your job. That's it. Like if your job is your passion, then that is beautiful and that is awesome. And like you cannot beat that,
Yeah.
But most of us don't have that. Most of us are just working a job to pay the bills, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there has to be something else, an aspect. We can't just zombie through life and just go through the motions. That's just it. It just doesn't make much sense to me, and there has to be something. And I'm not saying you have to jump out of planes. I highly recommend not jumping off of mountains or jumping out of planes. If that's not your passion, like I don't feel like people need to put themselves in harm's way or get hurt or potentially get hurt
Right.
to then feel what you feel or what I feel. I feel like there's several aspects, but I feel like a lot of people are just going through the motions because society has told them, hey, this is what you should do because we're all doing it. So they just get on this hamster wheel and they're just constantly turning circles, just paying the bills to then pay for this other thing, to then pay for this other thing, to then pay for this other thing. And it's just a never ending cycle. And it's trying to find the balance because obviously money's real. You need money to go do things. You need money to eat. So I fully understand that, hey, we have to pay bills. There's nothing wrong with that. But just try not to get caught up in the mundane stuff of, oh, I need this new iPhone. I need this new, car. I need this new shirt. I need whatever it might be. It's just so mundane. It doesn't really matter,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you, in some ways, I feel like jumping up and dancing up and down the aisle here. I mean, because you hit a lot of the things that sometimes I feel like I'm just preaching it, rah, 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 and you're like, oh no, this is my train, I'm going to jump on it, and you're saying it all that, if you're not getting satisfaction from your job, and not all jobs are satisfying. Now, almost all jobs that are out there are jobs that need to be done, right? There was a time in my life where I was just a paperwork guy in the military. I looked up and I found myself,
Right.
I'm just a paper pusher. This isn't even the job that I joined, but through promotions and things like that, here I am sitting behind a desk doing paperwork packets all day. And there's little to no thrill in going through, a 60-page packet for something, just looking for typos. There's not,
Right.
so what did I have to do? At lunch I would strap on my shoes and go for a hard run, and just get it all out, and then go, do martial arts training afterwards or go out for another workout, and then spend time with the family. I had to purposely put myself in these places, because it's good money. It was a good life.
For sure. For sure.
It everything was getting taken care of, but me, So I had to find a way to do that, and I think it's okay to admit that. I think though that's where a lot of people get messed up, especially the male psyche, right? I provide for this house. I did what I needed to do. Leave me alone on the couch for 10 minutes. I just want some peace. No, you don't actually want peace. What you're really wanting is that satisfaction. And the only way to get it is to get out, go find it, and, it can be sometimes the oddest things, making furniture, all of a sudden you decide to make furniture by hand and you plane some wood and you're like, oh, this is what's deeply satisfying. I've never ran a hand
Right.
planer before, but wow, and then the pride and work that happens. Or you could end up being a crazy ADD kid like I am, and every few months I find myself jumping on a new hobby, and
Totally.
getting obsessed with it, and I want to learn how to paint, and so for a few months I'm all involved in painting, and then it's like, cool, I've learned this, let me put it on the shelf and try something else, because I am that type. I constantly, I want a little something different, I want a little something different, I want to challenge myself in a myriad of things. And I guess that talks about the whole spectrum.
Right.
Not everybody needs something extreme to even feel satisfied. Meanwhile, there's other people who only find their life's passion jumping out of planes. So you get this crazy plan, right? Let's just call it crazy.
Yeah.
And had you even done one skydiving session, or where were you at on that scale?
No, yeah. So I literally, I didn't know of anybody that had skydived at the time. I didn't know anything. Like, nobody I knew or even heard of had jumped out of a plane, had any idea of how to get your license, which is then I figured out how you actually then start to skydive on your own as you get a license. I knew absolutely nothing. Like, I spent so many hours on the internet trying to research what should I do, calling up my local skydiving places, of trying to figure out the info. And it was like, a lot of people were like, oh, well, maybe you should just try it. Like, maybe you should just try going tandem where you're strapped to somebody first. Maybe you should just do that. And I was like, nope, no, I want to do this. I don't see what the problem is. Like, I just want to go do this. Can I just, like, well, let's just get it squared away. Let's just go do it. So it was really weird because I just had that, like I said, like, sometimes when I get obsessed with something, I just do it. Like, I just have to do it, So, and it sounds like you're kind of the same way with something. Like, you'll have something for 2 months and you'd be like, or 3 months, you'd be like, okay, cool. I've nailed that now. I've learned a lot about it. Now let me move on to the next thing. Like, you focus on something and you're set and you'll do it, and then you move on to the next, and now you're on to the next thing, and that's how I was. I was like, okay, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this to get to here, So let me do all these things, get it done as soon as I can in order to get to here, So my sole focus was on that every day. And so that's what's funny too, is I didn't know anything. I went into this fully blind, not knowing what to expect, and just knew that I had to do it in order to feel like I was accomplishing something and that I was still living out my dream and my passion, And I think it goes back to exactly what you said with there's full ends of the spectrum, right? Like, there's somebody like me who might have to have a little bit more of an extreme to live out my dream and feel like I'm fulfilling something. You know what I mean? But then there's the other side of the spectrum where, like, it's the furthest thing from it. You don't have to do anything that's extreme. You don't have to feel like you're, putting your life on the edge or life on the line in order to feel that, in order to live your dream. But I feel like everybody has to find that passion. They have to find something that makes them feel happy inside and that can actually set more drive in them. Because I just see it all the time. And because I was that way, right? Like, I had a normal job like everybody else. I worked every day, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I did the normal job stuff. And I did that all the way up until about 2 years ago. It was just 2 years ago that I was able to then finally turn this into like a full-time job. And to be honest, who knows, maybe a year from now, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, I have to go back to a regular job. That's not out of my cards, because we all got to pay bills. Like you said, like, you're in the military, that's damn good pay. Like, you can't argue with that at all. And one day I might have to go back and have a normal job. But until then, I'm going to stay on this train and ride it out as long as I possibly can.
Right.
Because I've found this avenue. But I know what it's like, and I feel like a lot of people maybe separate us a little bit. Like, oh, this guy hasn't had a job. This guy doesn't work.
Right.
Like, he just goes out and jumps in wingsuits. I'm like, no, like, I had to go into, $30,000 worth of debt on my credit cards because I was working this 9 to 5 job that wasn't paying my bills, and I still tried to live out this passion. So it's like the balance that everybody has, and it's just a matter for everybody else has a totally different scale. And we just got to find that balance for ourselves. Here's how much I need to work and survive, and here's how much I need to still fulfill my passions and my dreams. And that's the balance that we're all trying to work with, So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and we are talking about that spectrum there, but it does make me want to just say, I think everybody should at least push themselves to their extreme at some point, just to know. Because if you've never done it, then how do you know? Find your passions, keep searching, never stop moving, but do something extreme, even if it's just bungee jumping or something like that. Go truly find something that truly pegs out that adrenal gland just one good time.
Right.
Just one
Right.
good time, just reach in there and, oh, okay. I've never seen colors so bright in my life.
Right. Well, and I think that's the other thing too, right? Is like it's the aspect of it's the it's an avenue of trying to find something and trying to understand what's so scary about it. Why is it that we stand on the edge of a cliff? Literally, your knees are shaking, your arms are shaking. You can't even hold anything in your hand if you try to. Like, why is that? And like a lot of people just be like, well, yeah, I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. I can fall off. Duh. You're like, well, no, there's more to it. It's a survival instinct that we all have, right?
Yes.
It's this, hey, I don't want to put myself towards anything that I could possibly die or get killed from. So I'm going to step away from it. Well, at the same time, you can do these things very safely. You can do these things with a very, very, very safe margin. Like you said, like bungee jumping or even tandem skydiving. Tandem skydiving is very, very safe. The stats and the odds are very, very good. You know what I mean? Doing something like that is just another avenue. It's like you said, you just get out of your comfort zone.
Right.
And that's what I like. That's what I try and compare it to is getting out of my comfort zone. Sometimes, like I know it's super mundane, but if I'm going home from work or something, I'll literally just take another route home from work. Like I did that all the time. It was just to get out of the comfort just every once in a while. Small stuff like that will build up over time, and then you can start to work your way through certain things like fear. I think it goes back to fear of trying to work your way through certain fears, like a fear of a relationship, a fear of getting out of a relationship, a fear of leaving your job to go find another job, even though this job might not be that good, but it has the potential. Like I think that's an everyday thing that we all go through of like, I don't want to leave my comfort zone because my comfort zone is my job, my car, my house. Like this is comfortable to me. I can sit here for the next 80 years. Well, I think they tend to forget too that like that's the likelihood of that, I guess you could say, is very, very rare. Like the likelihood of you going into your 80s and living in your nice house with your car and nothing ever happening to you or your family members, I think is an unrealistic approach to it. Like that's not really real. Like I have a lot of friends who aren't even into base jumping, who have never done anything extreme in their life, and they're not here anymore. Like we all have those people that we know. So it's like, it's just a balance between that of like a constant back and forth, because just going through the motions is just it's not living.
Yeah, I think that a good way to phrase it is humans have an innate fear of the unknown. While at the same time being intensely curious creatures. I mean, we're just a dumb monkey, man. We're scared of everything, but at the same time, got to go poke it with a stick. There's this little dichotomy in our brains sometimes, and I like to call it the survival instincts. We want to survive, we want to find a comfortable place, and because it wasn't just a few hundred years ago, mankind truly went through grueling things day in, day out, just to exist, just to barely live long enough to have a kid, barely raise it, and we're gone. If we're lucky, yeah, we make it to 60, 70. People could still live long times, but a lot of them died young. A lot of them didn't make it, and so it was a hard scrabble existence. And so I think we have this innate laziness to operate at whatever level just gets us by, because the operating level to just get by used to be a lot higher, and so we have this instinct. So I think we have this thing in our brains that we are supposed to operate under really hard conditions, while at the same time resting every chance we get. And now it's too easy to rest. It's just simply too easy to rest. I can work my 8-hour, 10-hour, day, and then I can come cuddle up on this couch, kiss my kids, feel all happy and content for a while, and then I find myself in that vicious cycle we're talking about, right? So we have to constantly artificially push ourselves, I think, nowadays, because if you're in the first worlds, if you're one of the lucky people to be in a first world country like we are, it's not an external stimuli making it happen. Which is why I think discipline's a pretty important thing for people's existence now. They have to create that getting up at 5 a.m. and working out before work, or telling themselves at the top of a mountain, okay, you weren't done. Now it's time to jump. Whatever it is. Whatever it is that you can carve out in your little world, you get in there, you find it, and then you grab it and you don't let go. It's like you were talking about tandem jumping. No. Here's the goal. Way over here. Right. Here's the goal. I'm going to get to this goal. What you don't understand is that's where I'm going. So if you want to keep up with me, you keep up with me. But this is where we're going.
Right.
And it's the sellout. Sell out so that the fear of the unknown doesn't swallow you up. You're talking about a fear of spiders. Earlier. And spiders have a naturally scary thing about them. And who knows, it's a universal thing, so who knows if that's something just embedded deep in our DNA, Right. Whereas at the same time, most people aren't afraid of grasshoppers unless someone tells them, look out, a bug, And so I'm saying that, like, there's this little, lizard brain in us, I guess one would call it, that, drives so much of ourselves that we don't even realize. We're driven by so many instincts that we don't even know is driving us, I think, most of the time. I think people sometimes get halfway through their day without a thought. The alarm went off, they hit it, they got up, they shaved, they put on their clothes, they started driving, they yelled at the guy who cut them off. But did they ever really think?
Right.
And I think that that lack of external stimuli of difficulty. Now, if they had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go on a 2-hour walk just to get to work or to get to food or whatever it was, just to get to something, and they had to break a sweat and they had to climb up a hill and stub a toe and scratch their arm, they would be a lot more in the moment, a lot more aware. And I think just that base comfort, when we were constantly comfortable, then we just stop thinking. And when we stop thinking, then we get a little lazy. And when we get a little lazy, we just stop trying. And I think that's, right. You poke your own self sometimes.
Right, and I think that's spot on, because what it is it really comes down to a comfort thing, like we're all sitting around, we're going to our job, like you said, you hit the alarm, wake up, you roll out of bed, you know what to do because you do it 5 days out of the week, and that's all we do. And it's really tough to get out of that comfort zone. For me, it was, and for I think a lot of people as well too, is it's a comfort of being around people all the time, right? Like I'm constantly around somebody. I don't have to be left alone with my own thoughts. And I think for most of us, being left alone with our own thoughts is like the biggest thing you can possibly do
super
to
scary.
Then push yourself.
Yeah.
Super, super scary. Because for me, right when I hit my rock bottom, like I was telling you about earlier, is I cut everybody off. Everybody. Family members, everything. Nobody was talking to me. Nobody was doing anything. And I cut everybody off because I knew that I was in a wrong place, and where I was going was not the best place. So in order for me to find myself and find out what I want to do and what drives me and what I feel like I have to do, then I have to cut everybody else off, because I don't want any influences from anybody else. Because if I would have came out and said, "Hey, everybody, I'm going to go wingsuit and I'm going to go jump off the mountains," they'd be like, right. That's stupid. That's crazy. But like, you're not going to do that. And so people would then like shut me down. Right. Like, and I still have that even to this day, where people are like, what are you doing with your life? Like, you're just doing this. Like, what? I don't understand. But as soon as I cut everybody out, and I did it for 5 years. So my lady who's with me right now, I met her at that 5-year mark. Like, it was right around 5 years. And literally I had no friends for 5 years. No friends. I barely talked to my family. everybody knew, let's just leave Brandon alone. Let's just let him do his thing, because I didn't want any outside influence. I didn't want anybody to bring me down. And I wanted to be lost in my own mind and figure out what was going on up there, because I was terrified of death. I was terrified of heights. I was terrified of all these things. And like the most important thing to me was the death thing. I was
a big one.
Completely terrified of death, right? Like I couldn't even go through a night without having what I didn't realize at the time was essentially panic attacks. You know, I was going through panic attacks over something that I couldn't control or do. And so being left alone and being forced to deal with this stuff on my own, not get anybody else's help. And I'm not saying you should go out and get help. Don't get me wrong. But for me, it was being left alone with my own thoughts, because I knew I could fix myself. I just needed no outside influence. And I knew that there was something going on just inside of me. And I knew what it was, but I couldn't quite grasp it. And then once I did, after that 5-year mark, and I was totally comfortable, is when I started to break more out of my shell. Like, okay, I can let some friends in. You know, I can let the outside world now try and have some type of influence. But it's only because now I know who I am. I know what I want. You know?
Yeah, you just taking the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say you had to know who you were before you could even let someone else know who you were. And yeah, I think that's such a pivotal journey, you know, and I can't speak for the female experience, you know. I mean, those crazy, mysterious, beautiful creatures that they are. I mean, they operate on a whole nother level that I'll never achieve, and hats off to them. But I know for guys, through the teenage years, all the way up to about 24, 25 years old, which, you know, I recently found out is when the frontal cortex actually solidifies. I was like, you know, guys have to figure themselves out in order to step into manhood, right? Where this is me. And it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you think. This is me. And here it is. Do you like it? Do you like it? Cool. If not, get to stepping.
Right.
Now, I need to ask a funny note. Did she know that you was a wingsuiter when she met you?
So the best part about it is she had no idea what the hell it was. Like, she was like, "What, wingsuit? What is that? Like you work? Like you're like some older dude." Because at the time I think it was like 27, 26, something like that. She's like, because I worked at like a sporting goods store, so I was just a tech who just worked on skis, boards, bikes, things like that, just repaired them, right? So to me, to them, I was the older dude because I was 26, 27. Most people working there were like early 20s, right? Yeah. You know? And so she's just like, there's this guy that just works there, and like, I don't know, like he does this thing where like he wingsuits or something. So like, that was actually the best part about it, is that like she had no idea what it was. She really didn't care. Still does not care. and like, that's the best part about it, you know? Like, I'll just ramble on about wingsuit, and she'd be like, yep,
yeah, sure,
you know? And then like, it's nice because it's not somebody else that's, you know, driven in that same avenue. She has her avenue, she has her life, she has what's important to her, you know, and she does that. But like, it's nice not to have anybody that's in the sport who I'm dating or who knows anything about what I'm doing. She's just like, yeah, like I know it's dangerous, and she understands more, of course, as time goes on, but like, she's just, you know?
Yeah, I just, you know, I can imagine maybe her pulling up a YouTube video, watching someone doing it, and then being like, "This is you." What? Yeah.
That's probably the best thing about it, is like when I have certain people who literally do not know who I am, and that's the most beautiful part, right? Is nobody has any clue who I am. Nobody even wants to know who I am, and that's perfect, right? But then all of a sudden, somebody will be like, "Hey, I saw this video of somebody that was jumping off a mountain," and then they'll start to like tell me colors, like, "Oh man, it was this and it was that," and then like he had like some goggles on or something, and so like they'll literally describe me, and then I'll just play dumb, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's cool," and they'll be like, "Yeah, like this," and they'll show it, and I'm like, yeah, that guy.
That's my name,
seems
fool.
all right, or whatever. yeah. And so then I'll totally play it off, right? Like I won't even still say it's me. I'll be like, "Oh man, that guy seems pretty cool. He's doing that. Like that's good for him. That's awesome." And then I'll just walk away, type thing, you know? Because like for me too, I don't like. I get really. I wouldn't say embarrassed, but I get uncomfortable sometimes when a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, you do that? Like that's awesome." So a
Yeah.
lot of times I'm actually complete opposite. Like I don't like telling people I do it. I don't like I don't like having the attention on me, and maybe that's just growing up. Maybe I have some issues with that I haven't quite figured out. Maybe, but like when the attention's on me like that, I get kind of weird because I don't know what to say or do because to most people, they think they'll never meet somebody who does this extreme sport. Like that's
Right.
probably the one thing that most people say. Like I didn't think I'd ever actually run into somebody, let alone somebody that I could talk to or even know who does this sport. So a lot of times, like their mind's blown, and I'm amazed by it, and I'm so grateful for it. But sometimes I don't know what to say or do, because I'm like, I'm just like you, like we're the exact same people. I really don't see myself how some people might see me. I literally see myself as just some average dude going through the motions, doing my life, just trying to live out my dream and try and help others, But some people are like literally so thankful for what I've done and like the messages and things that I do. Like sometimes I just get uncomfortable. Like, I'm just going to sneak away, So,
Right. Yeah, I got into podcasting to exercise speaking. I think conversation's a lost art form. And, it's kind of like, for me, it was kind of like jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu, I thought, was going to be one of those things, like I was talking about earlier. I stumble into it. I do it for a few months or maybe a year or two, and I'm done. I didn't know that I was stepping into a lifetime sport, that takes your whole life to even get good at. And then podcasting's the same way, where I stumbled into it, I started doing it, and I was like, this is awesome, but one of the things with talking to people with all sorts of crazy lives, and coming on other people's podcasts and just having these long form conversations that most people don't even have anymore because of this goofy little evil device called a cell phone, which is amazing, right? It allowed me to message you, hey, would you like to come on? But at the same time, people have lost that art form of just sitting there and having a true conversation. And it takes a long time, but one of the things that I've learned, like you was talking about, you're just a person. Every really neat motherfucker I've ever met has that same feeling, that they're just a person. And it takes a long time, it seems, for people to even grasp that, to feel comfortable in themselves, to a certain level of fame. I mean, there's several YouTube videos we could pull up of you that have thousands of views, thousands and thousands and thousands of views, and it's because people are intently interested in something like that. Hell, I'm still intently like, wow. And then you're sitting here talking 200 jumps just to step into a different suit, the suit that you're actually wanting. You first got to jump, all of them out of airplane, I'm assuming, just to get to there, and it's like, wow, there's a certain level of dedication to this that I'm even deeper, so everybody has this passing fancy, and I think actually you've hit it right on the head with everybody wants to be a superhero, or everybody has a little superhero in us. How do you say it exactly?
Yeah. It's that, what was it? Everyone has a little bit of superhero in it.
Yeah, that's it. Everybody wants to be Batman, right? Everybody wants to be this thing. I mean, it's the reason why comic books sell like they do. It's the reason why people watch movies like they do, And I think sometimes if we would just grab our own selves and pull ourselves up and go, I'm now going to be the hero of my own story. I'm going to be the main character in this story because it's my story. I think that may be another way for people to solve this puzzle of life, is to look at it and go, well, if I was actually the creature that I wanted to be, that fabled self in my head that we all have, that perfect image of ourself that we all have in our head, and ladies and gentlemen, look at me, we all have that. We all have that little voice in our head that says, well, you could achieve more, or you're worth more, or you could be a rock star. We all grew up with that. We all still have it. That's not some kid dream that we all just so happen to hold on to. That is you. that is you, you know, and if we would just go and get it, you know,
Right.
shoot, I don't
And
even
like, I
know.
think it has to do with the comfort zone, right? Like, I think it has to
Absolutely.
do like with that. Like, my biggest thing is a lot of people might listen to this and be like, this guy doesn't have a stuttering problem. What is he talking about? He's been lying to me
Yeah.
this whole time. Well, no, I have a major stutter problem, but through tricks and things that I have learned through the 30 years now is that like I've helped to try and control it a little bit, you know, and that allows me to then express these things that I want to tell people about. And I'm thankful for that. But I've only done that because I do podcasts like this. I try and reach out. Anybody who wants to talk about the sport or anybody who wants to talk to me or anything, I always accept and I always say yeah. Anybody who reaches out to me and just wants to talk on the phone, anybody who wants to message me, I will always do that. And that's because to me, I never wanted to speak to anybody. I never wanted to go to class and raise my hand. I was always, you know, I was always that person that never wanted to speak in class because I have a major stuttering problem. But through that, I've learned to get over that comfort of like, I can just be the dude that's sitting in the back of the room, not saying anything. I could be that dude and I would be okay with that. But really, I want people to hear my story and learn from it and maybe feel inspired because I've felt inspired through other people. So if I can do the same thing to other people, then that's literally my life goal. That's more important to me than wingsuiting. That's more important to me than anything else, is to help inspire other people and realize that they can do what I'm doing or they can reach their levels of superhero. You know what I mean? Like they can do that. But in order for me to do that, I have to step out of my comfort zone and I have to go onto a podcast of somebody that I met online who reached out to me and be like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. Oh God, I don't know what's going to happen, you know, or I have to do the most terrifying thing that I've ever done, which is get on Fox News and do I think it was like a 10-minute freaking interview. And I had no idea what they were going to talk about. And there's millions and millions of people watching this. And I know that. And I'm freaking out. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I could have easily said no because I have a stuttering problem. And especially when you put me in front of a camera like that, when it's just one-on-one, I can help control it a little bit. I have my tips and tricks that I can fake it. But like when you put me in front of a camera like that, I know it's going to come out and I know it's going to be bad. And there's nothing I can do about it. But either I can sit on my couch and I can talk about what would have happened or what would have, well, I wish I should have done that or could have done that. I just went and did it. And that was literally the most terrifying moment of my life. Like jumping off of a cliff does not compare to sitting in front of a camera, having millions and millions of people watch. And then the worst part is we're talking about wingsuiting and then they cut to commercial. And then the cut that they have to commercial was he goes, and then when we get back, we're going to figure out what is Brandon's greatest fear. And the title of my video that they were talking about was what is my greatest fear? And it was about people finding out they have a stuttering problem. So then I'm like, oh no, they're going to bring it up. I thought we were just talking about wingsuiting. Oh no. And so then I just, you know, but again, it was through stepping out of my comfort zones and through something like wingsuiting where, okay, I have no control over this. Just breathe, chill out, let everything slow down, and just be you. And just smile and have a good time. Right. And I could only have done that if I had the training that I had, which is through the wingsuiting, through the jumping. I could have only have done that through that because I stepped out of my comfort zone of scared of heights and scared of everything else. And I just realized, like, this really is not that big of a deal. If I stutter the entire time, nobody even understands me on the show. It doesn't matter. It's not going to end my life. It's not going to. It just does not matter at all, you know. Right. And once you realize that, everything else is mundane. You know, it really is mundane. All of the stuff we go through, day in, day out, is really, really mundane. It really does not matter. Like social media, everything else, it just does not matter. And so, like, I stepped out of my comfort zone to help out other people. And, like, I think that's what a lot of people have to do in order to be great, in order to do better than what they are doing right now. In order to achieve that goal, you have to step out of your comfort zone. And it's going to get weird and it's going to get awkward. And that's why sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, like I get super uncomfortable when somebody brings up, oh, man, you're that guy, or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, like, past, I want to say probably year and a half to 2 years is when now, like, when I get like that, I then get closer then, I then try and put myself into more uncomfortable situations because I know that, like, I can't just sit back in the back room because that's not going to do anything. Like, a lot of people who come up to me are people who are fans of, like, not even my wingsuiting. The wingsuiting is a side thing, like, they've felt inspired by whatever I might have said or done. And that, to me, is something that I can't just sit back and not speak about. Somebody wants to come up and talk to me and say, oh my God, you inspired me. You've made me come into this sport. You've done so many things for me. I can never be as grateful. I can't just be like, all right then, and just leave, like I'm so thankful that they felt that I want to show that appreciation,
So you hadn't even jumped out of an airplane when you made this decision, and then you finally get a chance to jump out of one. How intense was that? Did that make you more resolved, or did that plant any doubt as in, ooh, that was a lot, I'm not sure that I can even maybe take the next step? Was there any sort of milestones with jumping that very first time to just to skydiving?
I wouldn't say that there's one thing in particular that was kind of like, oh, there was one moment where, like, I kind of got over it and I started to feel like a little bit better. But because I just have, like, this narrow focus, right? Like, when I just have something, I'm just in it. I'm in it full throttle. And I really hadn't worked on any of my fears at the time. So it was really rough. Like, the first time I jumped out of a plane was pretty rough for me. Like, I was shut down pretty bad. I was doing the normal response that most of us really have, which is like, I'm overloaded, sensory overload. I'm done. I just want off this ride. You know what I mean? And I had that, but it was the just, like, narrow focus of, like, okay, none of this stuff matters. I'm just going to continue to do this. That then helped me through those certain times. And then through that, once you get a hold of it a little bit and you can help control it, is when I started to work on the tiny other things, right? The small things about, the spiders or this and that. And then you kind of just step by step, you just fight through it, you fight through it, you fight through it. And then, like, it just kind of becomes more natural. You feel comfortable in that scenario,
Yeah, all right. And so 200 jumps, a little bit of credit card debt, right? Buying some suits and things like that. And you finally get accredited. What was your first jump? Walk me through that wingsuit jump, that first one, a little bit, if you could, for me.
Yeah, so the skydiving one was really fun, but the one time that, like, I can distinctly say, like, I just remember this moment was, it's a place called Sputnik, and it was the Crack. And it's a place where, like, Jeb Corliss and a bunch of famous wingsuiters who I looked up to at the time, and of course still do, but, like, they flew that, and I just remember being like, oh man, I want to go there and I want to do that. Like, that was probably the one moment where I distinctly remember being like, this is it. Like, I've made it. Because I can't use the skydiving wingsuit or the regular skydiving or even the regular base jumping, right? Because even after you get done and you're skydiving and you're wingsuiting, which means you're jumping out of planes with the wingsuit on, right? Even when you have 1,000 jumps of that, you're still doing what's called regular base jumping, right? Like slick, which is where you're just wearing normal clothes, or you're tracking, which is like a giant marshmallow suit. So you're even training doing that while you're doing skydiving out of a plane with the wingsuit and stuff like that. So those were never my goals, and I don't want to undermine those, because a lot of people, that is their goal, and that's awesome. But for mine, like, I was so dead set on going and doing, the wingsuit base jumping, which is flying off of mountains and feeling like a bird. I was so obsessed with that like none of the other stuff I was going through weren't really official goals of mine. I just know I had to get there, train my butt off to get there. So those moments weren't as distinct and clear as it was jumping off the mountain for the first time there after even jumping off of mountains other times. It was that one location that I was like, oh my God, I remember watching these videos. I remember watching all these things. And then now I'm here doing it. And this took me, 5 years to get to that point, So it was like one of those.
I mean, you mentioned him, and I honestly, that was, I mean, what was that, 7, 8 years ago? I think that was my first time that I'd ever even seen anything like that, was the Jeb Corliss grinding the crack video, yep. AWOL Nation playing on it,
that song for it and everything.
Oh yeah, that's so much kismet in that video. And then I remember him at the end of it, he pulls his parachute and he comes down and he pulls his helmet off and he's just got this look in his eye. Like, that's the thing that struck me about that video, is he pulls off his helmet and he's got this look in his eye like he just went to heaven, and he's like, woohoo! It's literally what he did. Woohoo! No one woohoos. No one's that happy, but he is, and like, that's what I remember most about that video. And I remember thinking, that is a beautiful kind of crazy, and so you're saying that he in many ways inspired you, and that jump, you've done that jump, and that jump was like the moment where you were like, I did it, I got here, woohoo!
Right. Oh yeah, like there was definitely that moment of woohoo. Like, I remember distinctly saying woohoo. So it's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, nobody woohoo, but when you're that excited, that's the only thing you can do is woohoo. But yeah, I mean, somebody like Jeb Corliss was important to me because of he was somebody that wingsuited, but was so in his head that he understood what he was doing. He understood why he was doing it. Mm. Now, we have totally different avenues. Like, his is, or used to be, like, he's definitely calmed down quite a bit, but like, his used to be death. Yeah. And so I'm not really, like, that's not really my avenue, but there's nothing wrong with that. We're just two different people who have come from two different spots. I can never be in that spot. He can never be in my spot. So I totally understand where he's coming from. But like, he was somebody that was so in depth with how he could describe why he does this, that it was the first person that I know of online that could actually let people know why he's actually doing this and that he's not crazy, And for me, hearing that and seeing that was like, oh, I can do this because I'm not crazy. I don't I'm terrified of heights. And like, he was the first person that I heard of to say, like, I'm terrified of heights too. And that blew my mind. Like, it completely shattered my world as some dude who is jumping off of cliffs and wingsuiting is terrified of heights. That made no sense to me. But I was like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And that's where the avenue came from, right? Was, if this guy can do it, then I can do it. And so that's what I wanted to try and portray. And that was my goal through everything else. If I can portray that, look, anybody can do this. And this realistically kind of hurts my brand a little bit, to be honest, of like, I'm normal. I'm not special at all. You know what I mean? Like, right. Because a lot of people want to believe you're a superhero. People want to believe you're very, very special. But like, when you try and tell them I'm not, and like, that's your main point, is like, I'm not special. If you want to do this, you can come and do this. That's been one of my main focuses, is because of somebody like Jeb Corliss had that avenue, and he spoke so clearly about it that like, it inspired me to go and do this. But if he wasn't there to say, hey, I'm normal just like you, I just choose to do this, that you can do it too. If that person wasn't there, if he wasn't there at that time to do it, I probably would not be doing this,
Are certain people landing without parachutes? Like, that's been done now, right?
So there was a guy who landed, I believe he's from the UK. He's a very famous wingsuiter, but he landed in a field of boxes, essentially. Like, he's like he's a stuntman. He did I think it was the Olympics. He jumped out of the helicopter, I believe, as like maybe it was Bond or something like that. But anyways, he actually went ahead and he just got this ginormous field and just wide open, and he put thousands of boxes up, and he's like a stuntman. And so what he did is he ended up jumping out of a helicopter and landing in this ginormous field of boxes. And that was the first person to jump out without a parachute, or jump out of an airplane, or or an aircraft and not use a parachute. That's only been done once with a wingsuit.
Okay.
But then there's an awesome person, Luke Akins, who's part of the Red Bull Air Force, and he actually jumped out of an aircraft without any parachute. So he was normal clothes, no wingsuit, no nothing, jumped into a ginormous net. And that's the first time that had ever.
Yeah, that's woo.
Yeah.
I mean, because I couldn't. I mean, like the thing in my head, I haven't done skydiving yet. It's still on my bucket list, but I could see myself taking that leap of faith because the safety net's on my back. It's right here, you know. Yay. Or even in the tandem situation, you know, there's a trained instructor. He's going to really be the one that kind of pushes us out of this plane and we're going to do it or whatever. But to get to the level of my net's down there, I got to go get my safety. I have to go leave here to get to my other place of safety, like the mental gap that has to occur to even, I mean, I would be like, hey, you got to push me out of this plane. Like the guy behind me's.
So to be fair, though, like this guy is like one of the top athletes in our sport. Like he has, you know, top maybe 5 jumps of all time. Like he literally he has probably 20,000 jumps. You know, he's part of the Red Bull team. He's literally been jumping since he was a little tiny kid. You know, him and like a good friend of mine, Andy, they live up here in Washington. And so we're jumping together all the time. And these guys are super dedicated to their sport. They've been, I think they're like 3rd generation or something like that.
Oh, wow.
For skydivers. Like their kids coming up are going to be the 3rd generation. And it's just, they're really into it. So with somebody like him, it's easy to think like, oh, this dude's crazy. But we were there when he was training for it. And it was, you know, he's there every day, jumping, fixing the lights, making sure that everything is good. Like everything was perfected down to the T. And I think that's a lot of issues too that people have, because this sport is illegal in a lot of the world. Like in the US, this sport is very illegal. There are only a select few places that we can jump legally. So like a lot of people think that we're crazy, but when they see the dedication and they see what we put into it and the years and years, you know, like if a stuntman can run through a ring of fire and get lit on fire, it's because he didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to do this, you know?
Right.
And so I think that's what the biggest key to a lot of people need to think about a little bit more is like, hey, we're not crazy. No one's trying to die out here. We're not trying to be the biggest, baddest people. We just have trained a lot. And so like when we go do a commercial or we go do a stunt for a company, it's because of we've trained for that stunt. We've trained for that. And we know exactly what we're doing. Like when I flew through the city, a lot of people thought that like literally I just put on a wingsuit and just flew through the city and flew through these skyscrapers. And I'm like, oh man,
I'll wing it.
Yeah,
Literally.
Yeah. But the planning that went into it was just, I mean, me and my cameraman were just, it's just so funny because we are like brothers. Like I can yell at him and he can yell at me, and there's no animosity, there's no nothing. We're just very honest and upfront with each other. So like we had an extra guy with us who's a friend who was helping us film and like do a few other small things for us. And he was blown away because he'd never seen this side of us of like, we're literally trying to figure out everything and trying to describe. And even before we got there, there was months and months and months of planning, of getting with the city officials, of getting with the helicopter pilot, like of just getting all these permits and doing all these things, because we wanted to make it legal and we wanted to make it so that anybody else who wanted to come up and do this again could do it. And we didn't want to ruin it for anybody else. And specifically, we wanted to go through this as safe as possible. So everything we were doing was very calculated. There was very little room for us to potentially screw up our plan, because of we planned out everything so well and made sure that no matter what was going to happen, it was going to work out and we were going to be fine, you know? So like something like that is very key, in my opinion, for people to try and understand and learn about, is that we're really not that crazy. We're just very calculated, and we train very hard, you know?
Yeah. When we mentioned the illegal thing, base jumping, is that the part that's illegal about it, or is it like all wingsuiting in most areas? Because I didn't.
So it's the base jumping thing that's illegal. So I can't remember what year, but back in the day, when they used to smuggle drugs, there would be people that would use parachutes. So they would fly over some type of land, and then they would literally dump something out of the plane and put a tiny little parachute on it. And then it would just land on the ground, and then some guy would run up, grab it, and leave. So that's how they used to smuggle drugs. So what the U.S. did is they then made it illegal to parachute over any type of land or anything else like that in order to stop the drug smuggling from happening, from happening, and to have any type of smuggling of anything, I guess, at that case. But what that did is base jumping wasn't around during that time. So they didn't even know what it was. There was nobody jumping off of cliffs at that time. We just got lumped into the law because it had something that had to do with the parachute. So I think that's where a lot of people think like, oh yeah, it's good. Well, because it's very dangerous. It should be illegal. Well, actually, we were lumped into a law that actually had nothing to do with us at the time. So the sport wasn't even around. So then we got lumped into it. And so like all of our national parks, we can't legally jump in. We can't be there. And it's a $5,000 fine. They take your gear. There's so many amount, like up to a year in prison, things like that. Like there's a lot of things that we are forced to do that might be illegal because of they don't want to recognize our sport. Obviously, it's a dangerous sport. Obviously, there needs to be some type of control. Don't get me wrong. But unfortunately, we got lumped into something that really didn't have anything to do with us. And now we can't even have that conversation with them of, hey, let's make some type of program. Let's make this safe. Let's do this legally. Let's have some type of program. Because if rock climbers, if somebody can go, say, free solo, which is where you have no rope, you have nothing, they can go free solo El Cap in Yosemite and have no safety net, have nothing. And we don't want their laws to get taken away. We don't want them to stop doing that. But we're like, in my opinion, I should say just me, my opinion is that like if he can go do that with no safety net and he can just climb a wall and that's legal, then I should be able to jump off of a rock with a safety parachute and do that. You know what I mean? Like just I think it was I don't want to speak wrong, but I think maybe it was this summer or maybe beginning of this year, there was somebody who actually fell off and died free soloing. And what's crazy is the different aspect of when that person died. It was very, very like, oh man, that's really, really rough. And it is. It's very, very sad. I feel bad for him, his family, his friends, and everybody. It's very, very tough to go through. I totally understand that aspect of it. But the response was totally different than what any other base jumper, like when they died. You know, like the response was totally different. And it's because it was made legal a long time ago. But like they had to fight for that. So we're at that point now where like we're trying to fight for that as well too. We're trying to make sure that, hey, we can do this and we can make it happen. Or is nobody going to die? No, that's crazy. Like any other sport, things are going to happen. Mistakes are going to be made. But what we can do is we can make it safe. We can make it legal. And we can have a program set in place for this to happen. But unfortunately, this talk still hasn't happened. We don't have the money or the resources yet to make that happen. So,
yeah, well, I mean, it's crazy to think sometimes that MMA used to be illegal, right? Oh, yeah. You look at it just on the base. MMA used to be illegal, and you go, what? Yeah, it used to be fought on Indian reservations with no regulations hardly because no one would have the conversation. And it wasn't until people went, okay, look, this can be regulated. It's a sport. It has the same level of, tolerances of risk that all sports have. You know, I mean, football players go through more head trauma than some MMA fighters, Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't, I'm a little flabbergasted right now that, so is there any torch somewhere of someone screaming from the top of some hill that this needs to be legalized? Or, is there some symposium somewhere? Is there anybody that's having that conversation?
So unfortunately, from what I've heard from other friends, is that Dean Potter. I'm not sure if you've heard of him before. He's a very, very famous rock climber, like one of the best climbers of all time. Dean Potter was that torts, from what I understand, because he was actually a rock climber who lived and like just breathed Yosemite. He was in Yosemite 24/7. That's what he did. With that, with a lot of rock climbers, what ended up happening is they realized, oh, I can climb to the top of this rock and I can just jump off. So once base jumping became more of a thing and climbers heard about it, then they could just jump off. So Dean Potter started that, and he started base jumping in Yosemite. He started doing these illegal activities within the park. Unfortunately, though, from what I understand, he was that torch at the time, and he was really into talking with the park services, talking with the president, going through the whole process of trying to, hey, like, let's work on something. Unfortunately, though, because it was still illegal, and it still is illegal, he did what most of us base jumpers do, which is we'll do a low light jump. So whether it's sunset or whether it's sunrise, we'll do it when it's the lowest light, and then we'll jump. He did it in conditions that were fine, but at the time, when everybody looks back on the tapes, and we've done our own little like research into what happened, if they would have had higher light and they would have had regular light, they might still be here. Whether or not they would, we don't know. But the fact that like he was forced, and many of us are forced to do jumps like that because of we don't want to get caught, we don't want to get a $5,000 fine, our gear, everything else like that. So we're forced to do that. So the argument is Dean Potter would still be alive. Yep. And would still be able to do this if it was made legal and you could do it at the right times and the right conditions at the right places. But instead, he was forced, him and his friend were forced to do something that maybe wasn't the best conditions at the time.
Yeah.
And because of that, he's not around. And so unfortunately, since he's gone in, I believe that was a couple years ago, there hasn't been anybody else that's really taken over the torch yet. Just because I said, like, he was such a huge force. Like, everybody in the climbing, everybody in that community knew who he was, and he was such a big deal that like when he started doing the base jumping, he started giving his full time to this as well too. Like everybody started to kind of appreciate it a little bit more, and he was really helping out. But unfortunately, right now, no one's really taken over, and no one's had the time or the resources to really get in there and try to help out.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense to me because a guy that would climb a mountain would be looking for that. It's that same level of freedom in my head, you know, of getting there and then jumping off and flying. And yeah, the need for that level of freedom, because humans need to be free, okay, actually made him take quite possibly an unnecessary risk, you know, and that just, oh man, that's sticking in my craw right now. Like, I'm just
right.
Yeah, I'm almost just flabbergasted at the whole thing. I've said that twice now, but he literally had to take a risk in order to be free that caused the incident. And here was a man who was trying to show the world just how amazing it is. And you're right. A man has every right to climb whatever mountain that comes in front of him, both physically, metaphorically, and whatever analog that also does that, strapping himself, joining the military, and being a grunt, and, you know, fighting war, or climbing a mountain, or jumping out of an airplane, or jumping off of a mountain, or jumping off of a bridge. There should be a path for that level. I mean, let's be honest, the robots are taking all the jobs anyway. So, no, but I mean, seriously though, humans are gonna have to figure something out here in the next little while, because the what we do in a day-to-day grind is gonna very likely be taken away from us. The guy is there's no longer a job where a guy picks up a gear over here and sets it over here. You know, we're so close to the world of the Jetsons where the guy just pushes the button all day, and he would complain about his finger because all he did was push a button all day. We're so close to that, and it's not even funny. That was the cartoons of our lifetimes. You know, we're both 30, and I just can't. Actually, I didn't know the history of that being a way to stop drugs, stupid drugs. And that's what happened there. And now I'm even more upset. I always thought that it was a thing that when the technology came out and guys were base jumping, maybe the technology wasn't there. And I imagine maybe that may have been a little bit of it. But now I know that technology and the man-made materials that are made in these wingsuits and these hang gliders, which is what is it called? Speed flying, where guys run down the mountain basically with a parachute. Is that legal?
Yes. So it's legal in some places, like like say you're going skiing or something like that, right? Like say you're going to some type of resort, like you can get a license.
Okay.
And then that license allows you to then speed fly down the mountain and stuff like that. Of course, only certain locations, right?
Right.
But I think that's the thing too, is like a lot of people, like, we're making distinctions here and there, but nobody's willing to step out of that and be like, okay, this physically makes sense. That if somebody can climb a mountain with no net, no nothing, no rope, you can climb a mountain and you can do that, and that's totally legal. This makes sense. Like, this is happening. Like, the biggest thing I want to say is, like, a lot of people think, well, I mean, it's not really happening that much. There is somebody jumping in our national parks in the U.S. every single day.
Every day.
Guaranteed. Every day. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, like, people just don't think it's happening. But, like, you only hear about one or two cases for the past however many years it's been. You know, like, there's only been a few cases in our national parks. But I try to tell people there are people jumping every single day. So, like, those odds and those stats, it's just people just don't know that there's actually people jumping.
Yeah, you know? to the point to where they're not even tracking how safe it is because they don't have the numbers. All they have is the one accident a year, and then it makes national headlines. Well, it's just like when a plane crash happens. A plane crash happens, and it's the news for 24 hours. Why? Because it's that safe. Because it is actually that rare of a moment. And if people would wrap their heads around that, maybe. And look, if a guy can wake up one morning and decide to run 200 miles up and down mountains, literally running, you know, those guys do ultra marathons, running hours and hours and hours on these little ledges sometimes, you know, 50, 60 hours, no sleep, just running, pushing themselves to these physical limits. Why can't you base jump in a national park, in a place that can be controlled?
Well, what's crazy about it, too, is, like, what's even more mind-blowing, and this is where, like, I was like, okay, well, I can understand both sides, but now it's at the point where I can't. And I know I'm skewed a little bit, but it's because I read an article a couple years ago, and I haven't read it in the past year, so I don't want to say exact numbers and get them totally wrong, but the numbers in national parks that are actually for rescues, right? Now, again, we're jumping in parks every day. There are people jumping in parks every single day. So, like, the numbers that are for saving of pets, for animals, for saving of hikers that are lost, for hikers that run out of water, for, like, just the ridiculous amount of people that are out there doing crazy things that they should not be doing because they have no idea what they're doing.
Or preparedness. They have no preparedness for them.
Yeah, exactly. That's even better to say. Like, they're just not prepared. You know, they're just not prepared at all to do it. And they're out there, and they have to get a heli rescue, and they have to get saved. Or an animal, because they bring a pet along with them, gets trapped or lost, and then they have to go rescue a pet or animal. Like, there's more of those, and the numbers are astounding. Like, not even close to our numbers. Because, again, there's only been a few instances in our national parks where they've had to come and rescue somebody or somebody has died. So, like, our numbers compared to what goes on through a yearly basis of what they have to come and rescue is ridiculous, but somehow we're still lumped in, you know, because and like, again, I think it's not people's fault. It's just they don't understand that, like, we're not just out here putting on a wingsuit and just jumping. You know, we have a lot of experience, we have a lot of time in the sport. We help regulate ourselves by doing that. If there's somebody that does not belong here, then that person will get shunned, and that person will be told, you don't belong here. You are not jumping here. So we help self-regulate as well, too. So, like, a lot of people don't realize that it's a lot more intense than what most people think, you know?
Yeah. Now, and just so we don't finish out our time on that, because it pisses me off. that the land of the free and home of the brave have a stupid law like that, now that I'm thinking about it, because I didn't think about it. And that's the beauty of conversations like this, is that now it's in my head and I'm like, "Ugh." And I think that may be true for a lot of people, by the way. I think that if this gets pushed out, if that kind of message was out there getting pushed, I think a lot of people would agree with it. I think there's a lot of people that would go, "You're right. They have a right to do what they want." And just at that level, they have a right to do what they want as long as we can make it as safe as possible. And I think technology today, I think with just a few regulations, just a few, because everything in life needs a few regulations.
For sure.
It could be a perfectly within normal parameters of safe that we'd like to call safe to do. Now, because you can't do it here, you get a chance to travel around the world, right, a little bit, and go to some pretty exotic places. And you were talking about flying through a city just the other day, and then at the very beginning of this, you were talking about going on Google Earth and making measurements and things like that. Just made me think about math. And if someone had maybe explained math to you this way in junior high and high school, would you have paid a little more attention? If you do math, then you'll know how long you can fly through areas, and you can do some really cool things with your wingsuit. If maybe someone had mentioned that, would the world have been a better place for you when it came to the world of math? Does math play a role?
For sure. Math plays a huge, huge role, like especially when you're trying to figure out, how far down something is, how far out something is, what's your glide to that. Like, there's so many numbers that just go on in your head on a daily basis of what you can or can't do, that it really is super, super important. And yeah, if somebody was like, "Hey, you're going to need numbers because you're going to want to fly off of stuff, and you need numbers for that," I'd have been like, you know what? Maybe I should pay attention to this. So yeah, for sure. Math is huge. And I think that's another thing too, that goes back to us training and learning, is we're staring at maps. We're calculating everything. We're calculating every degree. We're really reading the terrain, and we're not doing these close proximity flights everybody sees.
Right.
The first time we jump, we're doing six or seven jumps of that same flight over and over again, and we're reading terrain. And then even before that, we're spending months and months and months learning the terrain, hiking it. There's just a lot of stuff that goes into it, I guess is what you can say.
Yeah, I mean, and what made me think of the math thing is shooting for me. If someone would have been like, "Look, Brock, if you want to shoot past 600 yards ever in your life and be that cool guy that can shoot out that, those crazy distances, you're going to have to learn math." If someone had explained that to me until, but instead there I was 23, 24 years old, shooting on gun ranges. "Oh, I want to shoot further. Oh, I want to shoot further." And then someone going, "Oh, well, then you'll need this math table because now you got to start worrying about bullet trajectory. And, oh, you know what? You got to start worrying about the world literally spinning."
Mind blowing, right?
Right, yeah. And then it was like, oh, math does matter. And you see the memes and jokes all the time of someone saying, "Another day and I didn't use algebra." Well, I would say expand your horizons a little bit, or maybe you could be doing your job better in life if you knew that algebra. Now, you mentioned having to do the jumps several times before you even try to do something like, let me get, within 15 or 10 feet or whatever, close to an object. And I'd like to know how close you get to objects. But there's a safe jump, right? And then there's a little more risk, and then there's a conversation out loud between you and a buddy, but also weather, right? And I'm just thinking about wind gust and things like that. Walk me through some of the weather considerations and getting close to objects and that path that goes down.
So weather is huge, right? It's funny because my family, they're like, "Oh, I wonder what it's going to be like for the next week." I'll be like, "Yep, Friday's going to be this, Saturday's going to be that, Sunday's going to be that." And it's because we're constantly analyzing the weather. There is no just one app that we have that is here's the weather and here's exactly what everything you need to know about. So we're constantly analyzing the weather. And through that is through paragliders. Paragliders have really helped us base jumpers understand the weather a lot more. And so we're constantly analyzing the weather. Yeah, if it's windy, if it's gusty, then you cannot get close to objects because of there's rotors off of objects. So like if you're flying through a huge gap of trees and it's super windy, well, there's rotors. And so those rotors can essentially come off those trees and cause a lot of turbulence where you're flying through, especially for even if you're leaving a mountain, right? If you're wanting to jump off, you got to know what is happening at that altitude, what the clouds are going to be. Like we can't jump through clouds because we can't see where we're going. You know, it's like driving through the thickest fog you've ever seen, and nobody wants to do that. So weather is huge. Like you really got to learn a lot about the weather, constantly analyze it. And then with getting close, you know, we can get up to a couple feet from an object. But over time you start to realize that like the difference between 1 or 2 feet and the difference between 5 and 10 feet is so minimal, your eyes can't even realize that you're that close, right? So then we start to realize that, okay, 10 feet or 15 feet gives us a little bit more room for error, whereas 1 to 2 feet gives you almost none.
Yeah.
So then you start to analyze of like, okay, well, you're a little bit more experienced in the sport. You understand the negatives of it. And then you start to realize like, okay, yep, the 1 to 2 feet really isn't that ideal anymore. You know what I mean? Like you can't even notice the difference. Like my eyes could not tell the difference between 1 and 2 feet at 120 miles per hour and 5 and 10 feet. There's no way your eyes can calculate that. So like it's nice just to stay away from the objects a lot more, not get as close as what some of us used to do when we were younger and dumb, right? Of like, woo, you know.
I almost touched it.
Right. And that's another aspect that me and my buddy have really started to analyze a lot more is like, it's only sustainable for a certain amount of time. And everybody's been doing this from the very beginning. Like you want to analyze everything you're doing 24/7. It's very, very, very important if you want to stay alive. So we all do it. But then you get to a certain point where friends start dying around you, you know, like you see a lot of people that are dying around you. You have to deal with those situations. You see what happens. And like through those experiences, you try and learn and grow as a person as well, you know? And so we're at the point where people have literally touched the ground in their wingsuits. They've touched trees. They've touched things. Like that is gone now. That's not amazing anymore to people, you know, like they see drones flying at 160 miles an hour. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't really matter as much anymore. Our sport isn't there now. Our sport is past that. You know, like I think a lot of us need to get past that aspect of like flying as close as we can to every single object, because it's just, that's just not what our sport is about anymore. That's come and gone. People have touched it. We just need to move on now. So now it's the aspect of how do we still make this interesting and how do we still make people appreciate our sport? And there's plenty of ways to do it without having to get super technical and get as close as you can to objects and do all these crazy things that just help. They pretty much just minimize and make it a lot riskier for us, you know? So I think a lot of us are at that point in the sport as well too. We just need to make it fun again and just make it, you know, open and help people understand and appreciate the sport more and know that we're not out here trying to get a foot off the ground or 2 feet off the ground. We're just out here just trying to have a good time, have fun, be safe, and trying to have have everyone appreciate our sport and realize that like we're not trying to do that. We're trying to move past that spot in our sport, you know?
Yeah. And you mentioned drones. Has drones, because drones have exploded over the last couple of years, have drones kind of helped revolutionize the way you're capturing some of these images? And are they used in the capturing of images of the sport, or is it still not an integrated thing?
So it's still not fully integrated yet because of our speeds. It's a very small resource of drones that can actually take it and actually handle it. There are a couple of videos out there though of some excellent drone pilots with some special drones, and they've actually followed us, and it's spectacular. It's literally the most amazing footage you can see because no cameraman can do what a drone can do as far as rolling around you 60 times while you're flying through the sky. But it's not officially in our sport yet because they have drones that follow you, but they're following you up to 20 miles per hour, not 120 or plus. So hopefully within the next few years, I'm sure we're going to see that more and more in our sport once they figure out how to actually fully integrate that, you know?
Right. And that just, just kind of put me on that tangent, but I was like, oh yeah, that's an interesting thought. Well, brother, it's been 2 hours.
Damn, it's been 2 hours. That's crazy.
Yeah, this was awesome, and I really appreciate it. We'll have to get you on sometime again in the next few months or something, and we'll talk about that some other time. But I really appreciate you coming on. Give everybody, I guess, your Facebook page. You're also on Instagram. Tell them everything so they can follow you, because you deserve that follow. let them know.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, my name is Brandon Mikesell. How you spell my last name is Mikesell. If you guys want to come and follow me, that's awesome. I appreciate it. But more importantly, though, I just wanted to thank you for having me on, because, like I said, the most important thing to me is not my wingsuiting or anything else. It's being able to share my story with other people, and hopefully they either learn from me or feel inspired from me, and hopefully go and do the things that they want to do in life and what motivates them. So more importantly than my social media or anything else like that, I just want to thank you for having me on and really allowing me to have this opportunity to talk to more people, and hopefully more and more people will listen, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yes, absolutely. The pleasure was all mine, and you are welcome back anytime, or any of your friends that want to come on that do this as well. Just let me know. Any event that you need to share or anything like that, I'm in. Let me know. Let's wrap this up. Don't forget to follow Gorilla Banter Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any other way that you can get us. We're almost on all social media sites. As always, you can like and subscribe through Google Play, iTunes, Stitchers, or any other your favorite podcast directories. If we're not on your favorite podcast directory, let me know. I'll get us on there. Until next time, Gorilla Banter Podcast. Tell the world bye, Brandon.
See ya.
Bye.